right, next up here on the show, I'm joined by the guy I always go to talk all things Georgia football. That is Palmer Thombs. You check him out over at HQ, part of the On Three network. And Palmer, we're getting close, and I appreciate you taking the time. Come on the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. If you can't tell, I'm wearing the hat that I was comfortable getting all sweaty today out at practice. We got to see a little bit of media viewing periods today. So wore the dark colors and the dirty hat that I felt fine getting a little bit gross.
All right, so master's hat. So that there you go. Oh, and you talk about that. Let's kind of jump into it. Just with fall camp, going a few weeks in, just what's the big storylines? What's the biggest thing you guys have been able to see in here from practice?
Yeah, so we've had 2 media viewing periods as of this recording, and I would say the biggest storyline for Georgia, is the quarterback position. It's all conversations starting in there. What is Georgia going to look like? That seems to be as you go through the internet throughout the summer, talking about the biggest ifs and questions for the Bulldogs. Quarterback, offensive coordinator, having to replace both in a single offseason. What's that going to look like? And so, what do we know? I would say Carson Beck is going to be the guy. All money would be on him to be that guy, but who knows? I mean, they've still got a couple of scrimmages ahead here in the next couple of weeks before game day. And I think with Georgia playing a couple of cupcake opponents there early, UT Martin and Ball State in the first 2 weeks before they get South Carolina in week 3, would not surprise me to see all 3 of these guys, Beck, Brock Vandegrift, and Gunnar Stockton, getting reps in those games, because Kirby said it. Game reps are incredibly valuable, and they're incredibly important in the decision-making process of who's going to be that guy. So, you can think one guy's going to be the guy. How does he respond when the bullets are flying live? And look, we're not going to get to see any live action until the games. The scrimmages will be the closest thing to it, but they can still sit back there in the pocket feeling pretty like they're not going to get hit.
Yeah, it is different, like you said, when somebody's coming at you, and that jersey, that protective jersey, is no longer on you, and then one of them guys can get a hold of you, and you see it, with these games when they guy gets in, the bright lights, the fans are out there, the expectations, okay, let's do it, because we talked about after spring Carson Beck, but then we see him. He said he's a favorite. What do you see out of Brock Vandegrift?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brock is, former 5-star guy. He's mobile. And that's the biggest advantage that he's got over Beck, is that mobility, because that's something that has become a big part of this Georgia offense the last couple of years with Stetson Bennett. I mean, go back to that 2021 season when it became a decision between sticking with Stetson, who had kind of gotten on a roll, or going back to JT Daniels, who was the starter going into the year. It was that mobility factor that won Stetson the job and ultimately won Georgia that national championship. The ability to make plays with his legs, had to do it at times last year too. I mean, I think back to that opening touchdown run against Tennessee, where he, made sure to dial up the Tennessee fans with his finger phone, and made some plays, scored a touchdown in both the college football playoff games with his legs. Kept plays alive against Oregon early on in the season opener there. So, the mobility is one thing that Beck, is probably a bigger question for him. He's more of a pocket passer, your traditional play action, back to the defense, drop back kind of guy. Versus I think you can do a little bit more RPO wise with a Brock Vandegrift or a Gunnar Stockton. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit more stout, and built more like a tank, versus Brock is a little bit lankier, longer, but quick with it. So I would lean Carson Beck being that guy, and I think that they're going to be able to work the offense around him, because they've got the weapons to do so, to spread things out, to air it out, and to really showcase the arm talent that he's got.
Yeah, and looking at Georgia too, wide receiver, this is probably the deepest they've been since Kirby's been there. I mean, you got Ladd McConkey coming back,
For
Arian
sure.
Smith coming out. We saw in the playoff against Ohio State that his speed, how dangerous Arian Smith can be. Then you bring in Dominic Lovett, who was a very good receiver for Missouri last year. You bring in Ronald Thomas, Mississippi State. Of course, and you got Brock Bowers sitting there at tight end. So let's all focus on Brock and then just open things up for all the receivers on the outside. Whoever's a quarterback, Carson Beck, especially if he's the starter. I mean, it's got a lot of weapons to play with.
Well, and one name you didn't mention, but was a top 5 receiver last year for Georgia was Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. I mean,
That's right. That's
but
right.
known more for his blocking ability, but he, became a proven pass catcher last year and ultimate, returns for his senior year. So you've got in those 5 guys that you named, plus Arian Smith, so Brock Bowers finished first at Georgia in receiving. Ladd McConkey finished second at Georgia in receiving. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint finished fifth at Georgia in receiving. And then you add Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas, who finished first at Missouri and Mississippi State, respectively. You've got 5 guys that finished top 5 on SEC squads last year. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, you've still got Arian Smith. You've still got Dylan Bell. You've still got some freshman receivers that they're really excited about. You've got some freshman tight ends that they're excited about. So I'm really curious to see what we'll hear. Haven't heard from him yet, but as you're listening to this, we might have, so head on over to Dogs HQ to check it out. But we'll hear from Mike Bobo here later this week, and really interested to hear what he has to say about all these different weapons that they've got and the possibilities that are there. He's going to air it out more. That's a factor of the weapons they've got at receiver, the quarterback that they've got, and also some depth concerns at running back. Kendall Milton's dealing with a little bit of a preseason injury. Branson Robinson was dealing with one, was back at practice, but you've still got some question marks there. Andrew Paul is making his way back from an ACL injury that he suffered last year. Dejan Edwards was banged up this spring. The only running back that you don't have any sort of, they've got 5 scholarship running backs. The only one of those that you don't have any sort of hesitation about with injuries as a part of, maybe causing a little bit of pause is a true freshman, Roderick Robinson. So not a ton of experience. You've got more experience at the top, but certainly depth concerns for Georgia when it comes to running the ball. So I think that those weapons at receiver, you're going to rely on them.
Hey, if they struggle at running back, Palmer, all they got to do is just run them tall sweeps with Brock Bowers. I mean, that just seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's became a staple under Todd Monken was figuring out, how to get the ball in the hands of Brock Bowers. Kirby said it more at SEC Media Days. He said, we want to get the ball in the hands of Brock Bowers more. I don't know how that's possible to do it even more. The games that they did get the ball in his hands, special things happened. You saw him, running past linebackers and defensive backs and, just running free. So you can do that with him. You can do that with Ladd McConkey too. And last year, when they had, again, they were at 5 scholarship running backs, lost Andrew Paul for the season. So they're down to 4 there. They used the screen game a little bit as an extension of the running game. So, that's why you saw a Kenny McIntosh, go for over 100 yards in that season opener against Oregon. Had an outstanding day. You wouldn't notice it by looking at his rushing stats. I think he finished with like 20 something yards, but getting the ball to the edges doesn't necessarily have to mean, you're toss sweeping it or you're handing it off. You can get it to those running backs. And I'm not sure that the running backs will be as big of a part of the passing game because there's not a, proven pass catcher like McIntosh. But again, I think that you can use the screen game, getting the ball outside to Dominic Lovett, who's a fast guy, Ladd McConkey, who's a fast guy, Dylan Bell, who's a bigger, fast guy, Arian Smith, who's obviously got speed. You can get to the ball to the outside and make the screen game an extension of your run game.
Yeah, you talk about getting the ball to him. I mean, just put him on punt and kick returns. Brock Bowers, punt and kick returner.
It would be a sight to see. I mean, I thought you were going to say Arian Smith there, and I think that Georgia fans would hold their breath. They already do every time that he's on the field with his injury history. You got to be able to keep him out there. But Brock Bowers would be a sight to see because he's. I talked about Gunnar Stockton being built like a tank. Brock Bowers is tank times 1,000. I mean, he is outstanding. We heard from his position coach here in preseason camp, Todd Hartley, and he was a reporter was asking him a question about hey, you've got this player, he's all these different adjectives, and Hartley interrupted the reporter and said, special, is that what you mean, special? Because that's what Brock Bowers is. He's an outstanding player, truly one that I think Georgia fans should and I think believe will enjoy what they watch this year, because I don't know how quickly another player like him will come along. It's been a long time since they've had somebody like him, quite possibly since the 80s with Herschel Walker, and that says a lot because you've had some outstanding players in there, but a player that's as dominant at his position and I think as unique as Brock Bowers is, they don't grow on trees.
When you went to 80s, I thought you were going to tell me, say, a good friend of the show, Troy Sadowski, who was the 1988 All-American tight end for the Georgia Bulldogs. Give Troy a little shout out here on the show. I'm sure he doesn't mind me sharing this. He actually posted on social media here recently. He got to meet Brock Bowers. So that's kind of cool. Guy from the 80s that was on those Vince Dooley teams that was an All-American, played NFL. Now we're Brock Bowers. It was kind of cool. But
tight end positions changed a little bit since then.
Yeah, I asked him a lot about that stuff. I said, Vince Dooley never wanted to run you on the jet sweep. He goes, no, we did. We led that to the running backs back in them days. But anyways, defense. Obviously, with Georgia, you never doubt this. If the defense is going to be good, obviously, you look at it, okay, say Jalen Carter and just how dominant he was as a player. And obviously, you can't replace that with just one player. Well, maybe Georgia can with all the 5 stars, but what's the depth looking like at that position? Guys that can come in and, fill that void that, Jalen Carter, leaves with him being gone. I know the talent's there, but just the depth there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest questions is trying to find that game-wrecking player on the line of scrimmage. They've had it in the past couple of years with Jalen Carter. They had it the year before Jalen Carter. Jalen was a big part of that 2021 defense, but they had players outside of Jalen Carter that were game wreckers there on that line of scrimmage as well. Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, all 3 first-round picks. And, as a backup, they need a breather, throw Jalen Carter in there. So, who was a top 10 pick. But I think in trying to replace Jalen, there's not a Jalen Carter on this team. I think maybe the person with the most potential to be that would be a true freshman 5-star Jordan Hall. Do I think that he's going to be stepping into that role right away? Absolutely not. You've got some veteran guys in front of him on the interior there. Nazir Stackhouse was an all-SEC selection. He's somebody that there's a lot of excitement about. Played well last year, started all 15 games next to Carter. And so, what can he do to build on that? Zion Logue, Warren Brinson are 2 guys that have been around the program for a while. And you're asking guys to step up behind them. Like I said, Hall, Kristen Miller is somebody that was in that signing class. It was a true freshman this past year, redshirted and is going to be in his second season. What kind of strides can you see him take? I think if you're looking for that true game wrecker, you're probably going to the outside, and it's named Mykel Williams, because a true freshman last year, all freshman All-American, all SEC selection this year. He brings the kind of things that Trayvon Walker did, and he's younger than what we saw in Trayvon Walker. I mean, Trayvon did special things as a freshman, had a big sack against Auburn to seal the deal in that 2019 game, but he didn't lead the team in sacks that year. That's what Mykel Williams did last year. I think that there's a lot of potential for him. And, he's the kind of guy that, ultimately Trayvon went number 1. We could be hearing some talk about Mykel Williams as a potential number 1 overall pick. I know he's not a quarterback, and it wouldn't be this upcoming draft in 2024. It would be 2025. So, what does that quarterback class look like? You never really know. But, if you're looking for a defensive player in that draft class, there's probably not going to be many better than Mykel Williams.
And looking at this Georgia defense, and we know how talented they are, and you expect them to continue what the last two defenses did. But if there maybe I'm trying to use the right words, concern or potential maybe hole in the defense or something that just needs to be cleaned up, where would you think it would be at?
It would be on that edge, more at the outside linebacker spot than defensive end. And when I say edge, Georgia, like so many defenses, especially those that come from the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick tree, Mykel Williams is not going to play defensive end when they're rushing the passer. Same way that Trayvon Walker didn't. He bumps inside, he plays inside and gives you an interior pass rush while you probably put an extra, you walk your outside linebacker down to the line of scrimmage and essentially make him a defensive lineman, and you put extra DBs in the game instead of having a nose tackle in there. So when I say edge, I don't mean, on first and second down when Mykel Williams is on the edge. When I mean outside linebacker, because you lose Nolan Smith, you lose Robert Beal. Those were two guys that have been leaders. Robert Beal led that 2021 team in sacks. That is, you look at the talent that was on that squad and how strong that defense was. He's often forgotten in that mix and ended up being a draft pick from the 49ers. Nolan Smith being a first rounder to the Eagles alongside feels just like every Georgia defender, joining together up there in Philly. So, you look at that room, Chaz Chambliss is a veteran. He's probably not a great pass rusher per se. A good run stopper, first and second down, can set the edge, but he's not great at rushing the passer. Marvin Jones Jr. was a 5-star, and I think that you're looking for him to take some steps. He played through a torn labrum last year. And they limited, they kind of had him on a snap count, pitch count there, where they didn't want to put too much pressure on him, but they needed him late in that season because Nolan Smith was out for the second half of the season, final 8 games. Robert Beal was banged up. Chaz Chambliss was banged up. They needed Marvin Jones, who was banged up himself. So I'm curious to see what he looks like when he's completely healthy. There's a reason he was a 5-star out of South Florida. Excited to see what he can bring to the table. They also brought in some really good guys, that are freshmen. Damon Wilson was a 5-star also out of South Florida, who enrolled early and had a couple of sacks in the spring game. Sam Mpemba and Gabe Harris are both top 10 outside linebacker edge players in this class of 2023. Darius Smith is somebody that quickly shot up rankings in 2022 and was around last year. Long guy. If you go look at the picture of the missed Ohio State field goal, Darius Smith, number 19, is the player that's jumping up super duper high. So there's some, like you said, there's some talent there. There's not a lot of concern. You just are very curious to see who's going to step up there. And I would say that that's probably their biggest question. You've got a starting cornerback spot up for grabs opposite of Kamari Lassiter. Both those guys are Dalen Everett and Nyland Green are getting a ton of reps right now because Kamari Lassiter is banged up, missing a little bit of time early in fall camp. Those guys are getting reps. I think that they're probably going to end up rotating there. And the reps that they're getting as that number 1 corner, both of them right now, is going to pay off when only one of them is the number 1 corner, but both of them are playing with that first team defense. You've got to replace an All-American at safety. You're doing that with Javon Bullard, moving back from star to safety next to Malachi Starks. So you've got players all around the defense. Once again, you feel like you've got a very strong presence at every level of the defense. Mykel Williams at the front, both of your inside linebackers in Smile Munnin and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. And then in the secondary, you've got a couple there with Javon Bullard, Malachi Starks, Kamari Lassiter. But at each one of those levels, you've also got a couple of questions to be answered.
Yeah, so I hear Palmer, really good defense again. That's what I just heard from you.
Look,
Um,
they're gonna be good.
yeah.
They're gonna be really good. It's Kirby Smart, it's Glenn Schumann, it's Will Muschamp. These guys are good at their job. There's a reason that they are, that 2021 team, like I said, an incredible defense. They called them the masterminds. So, there's a reason that they've earned the respect in this sport for as long as they have.
I think it's kind of wild in a way. I mean, I'm sure you guys don't, and everybody that follows Georgia closely, the fans, and obviously yourself, the media. But I think maybe people outside away from Georgia, I wonder sometimes they forget that Will Muschamp is on that staff too as well. Because you
Oh,
think
I mean,
defense.
in your two offensive, I mean, heck, Will Muschamp's not even the defensive coordinator. He's not even the defensive play caller. He's listed as a co-coordinator, but really he's just he's more than just a safeties coach. But that's his primary role. Spearhead special teams a lot. But yeah, I do think he gets forgotten, and I think it's also forgotten. Mike Bobo was a head coach at one point, spearheading that offense. So you've got a ton of guys. Heck, Brian McClendon was an interim head coach for a game, at the end of the Mark Richt era there. So you've got a lot of guys that have a lot of experience in this league, in other leagues around the sport in general. But yeah, Will Muschamp is very much a big picture, a big part of the defense.
So as we close out the schedule, and I know Georgia's been given a hard time by this, but also look, Oklahoma was going to be on this schedule too. So I mean that makes it look a lot better. And you mentioned the third game of South Carolina. I just look at it really because I believe Kentucky is going to be better than they were last year, but I
I
think
do too.
Kentucky's problem to me when I watch them play, they play too much like Georgia, and Georgia sees that style in practice every single day. It's kind of like back in the day when Alabama was running that physical style, the AJ McCarron, Greg McElroy years. If you played like them, it was hard to beat them because they see that in practice. So to
Yep.
me, I'm just look at the 18th of November at
I would
Tennessee.
I would also, and on your point there with Kentucky, I would also add Michigan into that mix. Obviously, that's more of a national picture there, but I think that in a way you've got a large, medium, and small version there. In Georgia being the large, Michigan being the medium, and Kentucky being the small. In terms of the talent that they're doing that same scheme with.
Yeah.
And I think it's why Georgia matches up really well against Michigan and maybe doesn't match up nearly as well against an Ohio State. It's why they match up really well against Kentucky, but maybe not nearly as much against an Alabama per se.
Yeah, it is. You're right. I hadn't really thought about from the national standpoint, but Michigan. Yeah, that's why if these two were to meet up in the playoff, I don't think Michigan's it's gonna work out for them. But I guess for me, who knows what Ole Miss on November 11th? Lane Kiffin, who knows? And he might try to do something, Lane Kiffin-y, I guess you would say. But at Tennessee, I mean, I think that's one everybody's kind of looking at. November 18th at Tennessee. We'll see where they're at with Joe Milton, see how good teams are. But when you look at this schedule, and it's kind of a funny question to ask about Georgia. But where's the reasonable expectations at? Because I'll be honest with you, I could fully see this team three-peat. Just the schedule, the talent, their side of the division, there's a bunch of factors in that. I could see this team going for the three-peat. But what are your thoughts on just the reasonable expectations and where you think this team could go?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned a couple of games here. South Carolina early in the season, you get that one at home. I think that's going to be really good because you're going to get tested a little bit. I mean, this is a team that's just on the outside looking in of that coaches poll that got released earlier this week. Auburn going on the road is your first test late in September. You mentioned Lane Kiffin and him doing Lane Kiffin-y things. He's coordinated against Kirby Smart defenses, did it every day in practice there at Alabama. Hugh Freeze has done it too, and has done it well, coordinating against a Kirby Smart defense. In fact, the only team that Georgia, tying those two together, Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss, those two matched up in 2016, Kirby's first year in Athens, and Georgia took a beat down in Oxford from a Hugh Freeze-led Ole Miss squad. So Ole Miss is the only SEC program Kirby has not beaten. I'm sure he'll be looking to get that notch on his belt there. And Hugh Freeze is obviously somebody that's had some success against Kirby, so he's going to be focused there. We mentioned Kentucky. Missouri is obviously a team that gave Georgia some fits last year. You get those games at home. I think that's a huge part. I'm incredibly low on Florida. I'm not a believer in what Billy Napier is doing down there until they get the quarterback figured out at least, and they may be doing that in the class of 2024, but we'll see. Like you said, it really comes down to that Tennessee game. I would be very, very, very surprised if Georgia is not 10-0 going into that game. And I'd be surprised if they're not coming out of it 11-0. I think the realistic expectation, like you said, three-peat is very much on the table with this team. I think that they're more talented than they were last year. At least you feel better about this team coming into the year than you did last year's team because of how much they had to replace last year and all those uncertainties. There's a lot more certainty. There's not nearly as many questions this year because you've got so many guys returning. Now, college football is crazy. Crazier things have happened than, the most talented team not winning the national championship. I would predict that Georgia goes 12-0. I would not be shocked if they went 11-1. With that loss, if there is a loss on the schedule, I think it's a slip up. And quite frankly, I don't see it out there. I'm predicting 12-0, but that floor, your ceiling 12-0. This team has 12-0 potential every year that Kirby Smart is at the helm. Your floor might be 11-1. And that says a lot about what he's done, in now his 8th season at the helm, which is crazy to say. I think the recruiting that they've done, the standard that they've built, and the program that they've been able to, create here in Athens. They didn't create the program. They've reshaped the program in a way that is outstanding for Georgia. So I would say 12-0 is a realistic expectation. But it's not the end of the world if they don't go 12-0. They've still won 2 national championships. It's going to be surprising to see them lose if they do. And fans aren't going to enjoy that one. But I would say my prediction is 12-0. I think Georgia is in that SEC championship game. Very, very, very curious to see who it is coming out of the West there. Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M maybe. I had Alabama at the top of my media day ballot, but Brian Kelly's got the Tigers working there in Baton Rouge. So very curious to see who that is, and obviously, a lot more about the matchup and how those teams, face off, having seen 12 games. But I am expecting Georgia to be in the SEC championship game, be in the college football playoff, and be in contention for a 3rd straight national championship.
And that would be history making if they're able to pull that off. So it's going to be an interesting year to see how that does, how that chase for a 3 in a row. But Palmer, it's been a lot of fun having you on as always, talking all things Georgia football. But if the listeners and viewers want to check out online, where can they find you and all the work you're doing?
Yeah, dogshq.com, part of the On3 network. Super excited about the team that we've got going over there. 6 of us now. Myself, Jake Rowe, holding down team coverage, Rusty Mansell overseeing it all, and then some recruiting experts there with, did I say 6? Do we have 5? Jeremy Johnson, Jake Roos, Wes Blankenship. We do have 6. It's been a long day. So dogshq.com, at Palmer Thombs on social media, and looking forward to a fun football season.
Yeah, it should be fun. Just a few weeks away, and we'll be kicking this thing off. But Palmer, I always appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.